How does SharePoint Online work? In this video, we will see some steps to start getting the hang of this collaboration tool in Microsoft 365.
Wait a moment, I'll steal 10 seconds to introduce myself. I am one of the Microsoft most valuable professionals, and on this channel, you will find tons of technical videos to keep you updated on all Microsoft 365 technologies, from SharePoint to Teams to Microsoft 365 Copilot. Subscribe then to see the new updates.
Let's move to my computer so I can show you clearly with a few clicks how we can access the product and what its main features are. Let's start from the Microsoft 365 homepage at microsoft365.com. In the area at the top, we have the option to type SharePoint and select the related app to enter the product's homepage. On this homepage, I find all the communications created within the sites I have access to. I find the most frequently used sites that I use more often, and on the left I find the sites I follow along with the recently created sites. In the top left, I have the option to create either communication content or a new site. The SharePoint site is the first item I need to create in order to use the product's features. So I will create a new site. Here I can choose whether to create a collaboration site, that is a team site, or to create a communication site. This second template is more commonly used when I need to create an intranet site or an extranet site or any site for an internal communication initiative. In my case, I choose to create a group site that allows me to create an area where I can collaborate with my colleagues on documents, records, or other types of content. Right after, SharePoint asks me to select either a template. I can choose one of the available templates or choose to create a standard group. Using this template, I then have the option to choose the name of the site. In this case, I call it a demonstration team site. I can then choose the description. I must also know that once I have chosen this type of template and this type of site, since it is a team site, SharePoint attaches a Teams group to this team site, a mailbox to receive and send communications to the entire work group, a OneNote notebook, the ability to use tasks in Planner, and so on. So, from a technical point of view, within this SharePoint site, a Microsoft 365 group is created below with all these possibilities. Additionally, I can then choose the address of my site, very important for accessing the site through your browser. I click on Next. I can then choose some access viewing policies for my site. Since I am actually creating a Microsoft 365 group, I can choose whether it should be private and therefore visible only to the people who need to access and collaborate in this group, or if it should be visible to all the people in the company. Be aware that if you choose the public mode, all people who have an account in your Microsoft 365 will have read access to all the content of your site unless you clearly go through each piece of content to remove this access. If you instead want to have simple collaboration, I recommend the private team site type. Once this is done, you choose the default language. The default language allows me to specify what the language of the SharePoint Online graphical interface should be. In general, SharePoint also has a multilingual mechanism that we might see in another video. Once this is done, I can click on Create Site. The site is being created, but at this moment I also have the option to start adding members. In general, the team site type is designed specifically for collaboration, as I mentioned earlier, so if I add a document in this area, by default, all members of my group can edit, delete, or view it. And here I can already start adding members by searching for their names, basically. Once I choose one or more people, I then have the option to choose whether these people are collaborators in this group who can work on the content, or owners. The difference simply lies in the fact that the owner can add other people to the access of this site. In this case, I will leave it as a member. By clicking on Finish, I can finally reach my demo site, my team site. As an additional action, SharePoint Online also asks me if I want to apply one of the available templates. In this case, I am not interested. A team site is created by default with a home page that I can always modify, a navigation present on the left that shows me the contents within this SharePoint site. How does SharePoint work? It works precisely for pages, documents, sites, and list items. Pages are what allow us to navigate the site. This one we see is the home page of the SharePoint site, which, as I mentioned, can be modified to decide the layout of the content we want to present within our site, to decide to add or remove content present on the page. Each content is a web part. The web part is the object that allows us to add content and functionalities to the pages. There are web parts that are available by default from Microsoft, which you can find by clicking on the plus here in edit mode. They are all those with gray icons and a neutral background. Additionally, there is the possibility to add custom web parts when you want a functionality that SharePoint does not have, or perhaps a customized data view of SharePoint with your branding, and so on. Then custom web parts are created. Here are some of the web parts from Internet AI. Within the page, I then have the option to choose the POM layout I prefer. Selecting from these 5 possible column configurations, I can divide the page into 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns, and a smaller column on the right with a larger column on the left, or vice versa, a smaller column on the left and a larger one on the right. Additionally, I can choose to add a background by selecting from the backgrounds available within SharePoint Online in order to create my customized page, also from a look and feel perspective. Once this is done, I have a draft mechanism for managing page drafts. So if I save this page as a draft, only I and the site owners will see this version of the page, while all other users will continue to see the previous version of this page. And this is another key feature of SharePoint called versioning, meaning that every change made to a page, a file, or a list item, which we will also see, is saved within the system. So there is no possibility of losing anything. If I then want to make this version available to colleagues, I just need to click on publish, or in this case, republish, because the page already had a published version, so I need to publish a new one. All these pages can then be found within the site's content area in a specific file library called site pages. Within this library, I find all the pages that have been created within the site with the ability to access the version history, choose to take ownership of a page to prevent colleagues from editing it, add metadata to enrich my pages, thus possibly making communications divided by tags, or categorizing the pages based on content, and so on. These are capabilities used in SharePoint by users called power users, who have the ability to use the tool to implement processes within the company and thus digitize the process. In addition to this, still in the site's content area, it is then possible to add actual content, because so far we have seen how the site works, how the page works, but by clicking on the new button we can add new document libraries. A document library is precisely an area where I can upload files. I can choose to start creating a new document library from an empty library, or by using templates available from Microsoft. In this case, I choose the empty library. I can add the name of my document library. In this case, it is the procedures. I can optionally add a description and choose whether this library should be part of the navigation on the left. In this case, I am fine with keeping the navigation on the left. When clicking the create button, the document library is created, and it is, let's say, this point of the interface where I have the ability basically to insert new content, create, let's say, content from scratch using the new button, or also create a folder structure. The very useful thing is that once I define my document area, I can take files that I have saved on my computer and move them into the SharePoint Online interface with a simple drag and drop operation. This operation copies the file from my computer to SharePoint and thus creates a new version of this file directly in SharePoint. Once the file is in this shared area, as I mentioned, all the people who are members of this team site have the ability to view or edit the document. In general, SharePoint with its document libraries allows direct interaction from the browser with all documents supported by Office. So if I open the document, I have the ability to use Word Online to edit this document in real time and thus generate new versions. One of the key features of document libraries is the ability to add metadata to these documents, thus enriching the content of the document itself, something that cannot be done with folders on our computer. For example, I can add a choice field to identify the document's category among marketing, sales, and purchases. For each category, I can choose a color, and this is just one of the types of columns we have available. This allows me with a click to categorize my document as a procurement document. In this case, once this is done in the document library, SharePoint allows us to search for information with a full text search to filter information based on the content of the metadata, both for the default metadata, such as the file name or document title, or the date and person who made the last modification, or the date and person who created the document, but also for all custom metadata. Just as I can use SharePoint to insert documents into a document library, I can also use the site content area to add a new type of content, which is the list. There is a specific video where I talk about these lists. The concept of the list is to have data in a structured form, somewhat like having it in Excel, to share them with my colleagues. In this case, I want to create a contact list within my collaboration site. I can do this quickly by defining what the contact's name is. Perhaps I want to include fields like first name, last name, and the title field, which is the default field present in every list. I can rename. I can then add columns to specify, for example, the email of my contact using the text column, or define, for example, date and time columns where I can specify the date of the last contact I had with this person. By doing this, utilizing SharePoint's data entry features, I then have the ability to add new items and thus enter the first name, last name of my contact, the email address, and a date. As you can see, for each type of data, SharePoint provides me with forms to enter the data in the correct format. So in text areas, I could enter text, and in the case of a date, I had the option to choose a date through a very simple calendar. These are the basic features of SharePoint Online with which you can create intranet portals, extranet portals, collaboration sites for groups of people, document storage and management sites, and much more. Until next time.